A California school district has settled a lawsuit with a teacher who says she was fired over her religious beliefs and refusing to use her students' preferred pronouns. Now, to chat about this in more detail is American correspondent Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from the city of Angels in Los Angeles. Lisa, the Europa Unified School District in Riverside County agreed to pay Jessica Tapia a large sum of money as the federal lawsuit Tapia filed last May is now officially closed. How much money did she get?
You know, it's north of 300,000 was the settlement. But
Wow.
I mean, how much is fees and lawyers but short of all of that, this is a huge and significant symbolic victory for many teachers who feel like they have been um, really the liberal mob has come after them. They have lost their jobs. They have been targeted. They have been bullied. And, you know, for that reason, I think this is a very significant issue. Now, this county is not, I mean, it's in a very blue state, but not very blue in terms of the region inside California. It's inland and a bit more on the purplish red even. So I think this is even more significant in that it may have a trickle effect. I know that a lot of teachers feel this way. Many of them have been silenced. Many of them don't want to lose their jobs. And I think this is a good start. I had interviewed a math teacher maybe 3 or 4 years ago, right in the height of the pandemic, who had lost her job. A math teacher, and why? Because the school found out that on her spare time, she is a member of a conservative organization. It's crazy. She teaches math. Why should that even come into play? You know, you think about when we were growing up, we did not even know our teachers' political affiliation, sexual orientation, what their family life was like, even if they were married or not, how many children they had, where they lived. It never came into play. And now it seems as though the teacher's identity is more important than what they're teaching or their teaching ability or the way that they basically handle or walk on eggshells around this new, you know, PC world that they have created seems to be much more important than the content that they're sharing and educating their students. So again, a very significant victory in that regard to really put a stop to a lot of this craziness.
Now, speaking of lawsuits, Lisa, what's the latest with the Donald Trump hush money lawsuit? Will we see a verdict anytime soon?
It looks like it's all wrapped up. We're waiting to see. I mean, this is New York, so will we get a not guilty for Donald Trump? We don't know, but you know, the defense always has the ability to appeal, maybe get a mistrial, maybe you know, there's a lot of holes in this case, as those who have been following this have seen, and so you know, anything short of a guilty verdict will help Donald Trump, and that's what the polls have been indicating, that it has only made him more popular, and maybe even a guilty verdict. I mean, he can still run. He's a first-time offender in that regard, and look, you know, and not to justify anyone with any you know, criminal accusations, but I think a lot of Americans understand the political motivations behind this trial and how it's come at this time when he is running for office. So I think a lot of Americans would just want to get back to the main issues, you know, the economy, crime, the border, and to forget about a lot of this other circus stuff that is really distracting.
Now, speaking of crime, Hamas terrorists fired 8 rockets into central Israel on Sunday afternoon, Lisa, the first since January. And the missiles were allegedly fired between 2 mosques in the Gazan city of Rafah. Fortunately, 3 were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome anti-missile system. Did the remaining 5 cause any damage? Were there any injuries?
There were some damage to, these are all civilian areas, by the way, and I think that that was the point of this hit, was to go deeper into Israel, into central Israel, into Tel Aviv, which is very densely populated, Tel Aviv being really like a New York City, you know, and being very symbolic in terms of its economic headquarters, where a lot of companies are, tall buildings, a lot of civilians. Again, there was damage. 2 people were injured, no casualties, but, you know, again, this is more of a symbolic hit that Hamas is not backing down. And of course, as Israel has gone into Rafah, I know the world opinion is definitely against that, but it just goes to show, if they're shooting between mosques, they're hiding in schools, more tunnels have been found in Rafah, hostages that have been killed, their remains have been brought back from Rafah. Weapons have been found in Rafah. So again, I mean, for those who actually care about the facts, there's a lot coming out of Rafah, and I know that people are very much focused on the civilians in Rafah, which is extremely important. But more than 1 million civilians have been relocated to be safe. But again, if the goal is to root out Hamas, there has to be this Rafah campaign, because as we see, there is a lot of important infrastructure, weapons, terrorists that are there and launching from there. That is another headquarters as well.
Lisa, when it comes to the hostages, I think there are around 100 remaining or so that were kidnapped on October the 7th by Hamas. Do you think we'll actually find any more alive? That's what a lot of people are concerned about right now. That's why they haven't released any more hostages, because they may no longer be alive.
Right. And I think that that is truly something that is scary to a lot of the families that are holding out hope. I saw the most recent numbers from Israel's government is that they're hoping that about 80 or more are alive with the calculations that they have done, and about 30 or so that are still on the list of hostages being held are probably not alive. How the horrific thing here, for those who have seen some of the videos come out in the last week about the women who are being held there, being raped, perhaps impregnated, being violated in the worst ways. I mean, think about the amount of damage, therapy, abuse that these women, that have endured and will require. And you think about every hour that goes by, you think about these families that have endured this horrific ordeal to have a loved one being held by a terrorist organization like this. There's so much senseless death and destruction and abuse in this war in its entirety. And we really hope for some sort of resolution soon. But again, the goal here being to get the hostages back and to decimate Hamas, as it is doing so much damage and continues to, and has doubled down and said it will do this again and again and again. And I think that's not something that the world can live with, let alone Israel, which is in its direct shot.
After an Israeli airstrike killed a terror operative in Akura, 15 rockets were launched at western Galilee in northern Israel by Hezbollah. So not only is Israel battling Hamas, but the battle and the war continues with Hezbollah as well.
Yeah, there's about 8 fronts that Israel's fighting right now, actually, when you think about it, whether it's the West Bank or Gaza or Rafah. You're talking about northern Israel, where Hezbollah, another terror organization funded by Iran's regime, and actually the most well-endowed terror organization that has upwards of 150,000 missiles that it has pointed towards Israel. What many people don't know is that from October 7th and even before that, Hezbollah has been firing into Israel daily, into northern Israel, and many of those families have been evacuated, and there have been a handful of casualties. But that war has not escalated. Now, Israel doesn't want that to escalate, and it looks like Iran's regime is ordering Hezbollah not to escalate yet. But when they talk about this Hezbollah and Israel war in terms of its military, just manifestation, generals in Israel talk about it as a when and not an if. This will absolutely happen. We're thinking midsummer. This will, escalate into something very bad. And Hezbollah again having that military might. We don't know if the Iron Dome is able to capture all of those missiles. And it's a horrific ordeal and speculation. We don't know what will happen, but for now, Israel has been able to focus on the Hamas war. If the Hezbollah war is to escalate at the same time, it will create a huge challenge militarily for Israel, and again, a huge existential threat. This is the ring of fire that Iran's regime sought to create surrounding Israel, hoping to make it from the river to the sea, meaning Israel should not exist. It should be off the map. And that is why it has put its terror proxies in a way to surround Israel, to intimidate Israel, and now to engage in these military conflicts.
4 U.S. military support vessels involved in the construction of that humanitarian pier in Gaza broke free from their moorings after experiencing some pretty heavy surf over the weekend. Now, U.S. Central Command announced that there were no injuries. But, Lisa, let me ask you, did it impact aid deliveries?
Absolutely. And that is what the fear was. This was a horrible idea from the get-go. And the reason for that, Hal, is look, everybody wants aid delivered to those who need it, regardless of which side. Now, when we talk about the aid reaching the Palestinians, people very conveniently forget to realize that the reason why aid is not getting to the Palestinians is because of all the bad actors that are stopping it from getting to the Palestinians. So every time there is an aid truck, that the materials are taken by Hamas terrorists and then sold to the Palestinians. I've seen, the footage of markets where they're actually doubling and tripling the price for the poor Palestinians who can't get that aid. There are people shot at when they're trying to basically, rush the truck and grab the materials. And this pier, I mean, this is taxpayer money, US taxpayer money that's going to construct a pier. It's, I guess on the outset, it would be a wonderful idea if that we're dealing with normal, peaceful groups and governments, but we're not. This pier right now is not allowing the aid to get any further, and in the long run will become another terrorist hub. We're just allowing them to have more infrastructure and more ways to get weapons and smuggle all types of weaponry, to Hamas. And that for that reason, it is failing in the first hours of its construction. And that is a huge sign to the United States as to this is not the way to handle this war. In many ways, I think this has been a wake-up call that, the handling of this war has been something that the Biden administration is basically chasing, meaning they're always behind in realizing what is necessary and what the reality is, whether it's in rhetoric and pivoting from one to the other. Neither side is happy with the Biden administration and how they're handling this war. And then in terms of being realistic, yes, aid needs to get to the Palestinians, but why is it not getting there? Yes, we need to get into Rafah because of Hamas. So why are we tying the hands of our democratic ally, Israel, in the Middle East to not allow them to go in there and decimate Hamas? It's for votes, obviously. We're dealing with in an election year. This is the worst time to have this war, and perhaps a calculation on the part of the Iran regime and Hamas to launch this war right now. But I think it will cost the Biden administration. It will cost Democrats across the board because of the handling of this war has been a horrific foreign policy blunder on our part.
U.S. defense officials, Lisa, say that 3 U.S. service members were injured in a humanitarian mission in Gaza, including one who remains in critical condition. But the injured were not harmed in combat?
Right, and exactly right. We've seen a lot of this before in different parts of the Middle East, and this, again, it comes back to the reality of the situation. They're just there to help and to provide aid, and look at the reality of the situation. I mean, obviously, look, it's a war zone. It's not safe for anybody, even if you are, on a mission to bring in supplies and aid. But the fact that, it's not safe for them to deliver the aid, it says a lot about just the conditions there and the plight of the Palestinian people. We have said for many years, I wrote an article in 2014 focusing on, if you care about the Palestinian people, we must call out Hamas, we must root out Hamas. The number one enemy of Hamas has always been the Palestinian people, and now they have managed to brainwash a majority of the Palestinian people against Israel, focusing again on that enemy and forgetting about the fact that the Palestinian people, just before October 7th, were on the streets protesting Hamas, their own government. They have never allowed for good things for their people. Under the Trump administration, the Palestinians in Gaza were offered, a prosperity deal where they would get hotels and they would get resorts and they would get infrastructure and, $50 billion worth of just building and building and building, and they didn't even read the proposal. It was dead on arrival. That tells me and tells everyone else that they don't want good and they don't want prosperity and they don't want a future for their people. And if they did, they would not involve them in this kind of war.
Let's talk about the other war for just a moment here. There are reports surfacing from Reuters that Russian President Vladimir Putin may accept a Ukraine ceasefire on current military positions. Lisa, could we potentially see peace talks to end the 27-month-long war?
Yeah, so-called peace talks. Look, this is a very strategic play by Putin. As we know, Putin marks his victory by the acquisition of land. So it has always been that way for Russians, right? The more land you have, that's how you know you won. You're growing the empire and you continue that way. Right now, if he were to stop, he basically feels like this is a tipping point. he will acquire land because he's saying the ceasefire and the end of the war would be to mark where they are right now in terms of battle. So he would annex that part of the Ukraine. But at the same time, he feels like he might be losing, public opinion about himself and the war. You don't say, right? 27 months into this conflict, he feels like he cares about the opinion of the Russians. So he thinks this is a win-win. If he would sit down, he potentially could agree, and this is based on 4 sources that reported this to Reuters. So let's see. You never know with this guy. I mean, he can deny this all he wants tomorrow and say this never happened, or perhaps this is something that he could agree to potentially.
She's our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk. Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us once again from Los Angeles.
Thank you so much.